about project management, it's a framework of knowledge, skills, tools, techniques, right, to meet the project goal. And when we think about a project, it's that temporary endeavor when you're trying to get from point A to point B, you're trying to get from current state to future state. Change management is that people side of it. So really that adoption, training, getting people on board. When we talk about risk management, it's identifying, evaluating, preventing, mitigating risks. Some people consider risks to, you know what I mean, be changes to scope, schedule, budget, similar to changes and change management, but it's something that can impact the outcome of a project. If you are a more traditionally trained project management or operations manager, you might know that there are positive and negative risks. There's something that could go right and there's something that could go wrong. And we want to be aware of what those things are so that we can have plans about how to address them when they happen. Again, a more traditional project management approach includes a risk register as well as an issue log. So these are two different deliverables, assets, etc., that project managers oftentimes use to capture all of the risks as well as all of the issues. Risks being something before they happen, issues being something that is currently actively happening. And again, issues most typically are described as problems that are going to potentially delay the project, mess up the budget, reduce scope, etc. Right? So a very typical term here is called RAID. So this is an idea of a place to capture risks, actions, issues, and decisions. So this is something that we're seeing a lot of when we develop PMOs for clients, when we work with them in terms of providing better visibility across their different projects. Is it's not just the project schedule, the project plan, and the project goals and business case, but actually an ongoing way of tracking risks that are coming up, actions, issues, and decisions. With ECHO, one of the things that we do is we actually recommend that we use RAID oftentimes instead of just notes. Notes being something that are relatively static, something that is a one-time backup, instead focusing on what are the actions that were identified and who owns them, what are the risks that some of the team members have potentially indicated, or what decisions are we trying to make in this meeting. So how do we guide people away from using meetings only as a way to provide information because the tools don't have the information in an easily accessible way, and instead use meeting time to collaborate, make decisions, areas where it's not as easy to do potentially asynchronously with a tool. So we're going to talk about some of those tools today. With ECHO, we've actually, it's actually one of our clients that we were implementing this for did this. We were talking about RAID, but they didn't have a change management system set up for them. The only thing they could do is track budget changes, but they didn't have changes to scope or requirements. They didn't have changes to potentially resources or the schedule that had been agreed to. And so what we started to do was actually tracking meeting notes, the risks, actions that came out of meetings, potentially changes, as well as issues, right? So, and that's where this CRAID log terminology was really born, which is a single source of record for things that happen in meetings. Maybe it was an action that was assigned to someone that wasn't in the meeting that needs to be followed up on. Maybe it was a question that needed to be asked. Maybe there was a change requested in terms of a new resource that needed to be brought on. So the idea was to create a single source of record for all of these different, what we call ad hoc requests and things that came up over the course of a project. One of the major questions that we get is, what's the difference between a task in a project plan and what you would capture on a CRAID log? And this is a great question. So when we talk about a project plan or a task list or whatever you end up using, a product board, Kanban board, etc., typically we're talking about scope, features, deliverables, milestones in order to reach your goal, right? Like a higher level goal. So you're really kind of providing that guidance over the course. But when you're in a meeting and you have to question one person on something, it doesn't necessarily fit within this guideline of the project schedule. These are the types of things that we want to capture in a more ad hoc way. And that's where this CRAID log comes in. We're going to talk a little bit about Smartsheet and how we use the CRAID log from a PMO standpoint versus from an operational management standpoint in just a moment when we go into Smartsheet. But do understand that we have implemented this from clients from anywhere from small startup teams of like 5 people all the way up to Fortune 100 teams that really have a robust multi-level 4 different PMOs within their IT organization, right? So this concept is not something that's specific to big companies. This concept is something that can be used and immediately implemented for teams of all sizes to provide better visibility and a more proactive approach to identifying risks and changes in an organization. Great question. So CRAID is a combination of RAID, standing for risk, action, issue, and decision, and it adds change to the front. So changes. So it can identify the changes in a project, risks, action, issues, and decisions. Thank you. We didn't talk a lot about in the beginning about etiquette. I love questions. We ended up on Teams, so you guys can technically raise your hand and interrupt and or provide comments. I do have a couple members of my team here that are going to be monitoring chat and interrupting me. I talk fast and a lot, so it'll be good to have someone monitoring and saying, hey, there's a great question. So RAID, we represent something that's called CRAID, which includes also the change requests. CRAID versus change request, there's the question right there. The C stands for the change. All right.